thus resulting in numerous shootings, stabbings, as well as over 20 murders in relation to the Peckham Boys gang. Before I start this video, however, YouTube says only 8% of you are subscribed. So if you enjoy this content, feel free to subscribe as it takes time to make these videos and also helps out the channel. But without further ado, sit back and enjoy one of the craziest videos I have made on this channel.
Hey YouTube, back in with another fucking video. Today we're doing something different. We're not reacting to music, we're not reacting to a vlog. We're reacting to a short film, actually, basically a documentary. London's Deadliest gang that goes by the name PECKNAM, the Peckham Boys, or some of you guys may know them as PECKNARM. But yeah, we're about to be reacting. Let's get into this motherfucker.
And was often the result of gangs in the area warring it out in the streets. The most prominent and dangerous of these gangs, in fact, being the Peckham Boys, who have several offshoot gangs as well as affiliations with other crews. Now, Peckham is a district located within the London borough of Southwark, this borough actually being ranked among the top 10 most dangerous boroughs that make up the larger city of London. In 2023, the borough of Southwark had a crime rate of around 114 crimes per 1,000 people, this comparing poorly to London's crime rate as a whole. Following a 2021 census, the London borough of Southwark had a population of around 311,000 residents, whilst Peckham had an estimated 17,000 residents. This is crazy, as Peckham is relatively small, although this hasn't seemed to impact its crime, as at one point Peckham was named as one of the most dangerous areas in London, mainly being due to the Peckham Boys gang that controlled the district of Peckham. Within this video, I will take a deep and detailed dive into what made the Peckham Boys one of the deadliest gangs in the entirety of London, as well as the many rivalries that the Peckham Boys had found themselves in, thus resulting in numerous shootings, stabbings, as well as over 20 murders in relation to the Peckham Boys gang. Before I start this video, however, YouTube says only 8% of you are subscribed. So if you enjoy this content, feel free to subscribe as it takes time to make these videos and also helps out the channel. But without further ado, sit back and enjoy one of the craziest videos I have made on this channel.
I ain't nothing. Had you running in the shop like you're buying something.
TV will blow your head over your shoulder. You're fucking with a pet.
Man, look at the fucking jig.
Try it, young guys.
Man came, man.
We had them playing talking artists in a club and that.
Them boys covered up in stab wounds, chin splashed him and I splashed him too. Six splashed him, P subbed on him too.
PS! PS! PS!
Hey fam, us nags he done it, innit?
No questions, fam! Why are people for doing that?
The Peckham Boys are a large street gang from Peckham. Within the SE15 postcode, the gang was predominantly based around North Peckham, more specifically the North Peckham Estate, Gloucester Grove Estate, Willowbrook Estate, Camden Estate, and the Sumner Estate, these 5 estates being referred to as the 5 Estates. Now, in the 1990s, these large estates within Peckham each had smaller sets that controlled the estates, and later on, all of these small street gangs would link up to form the larger Peckham Boys collective. Example being the Peckham Grove Boys, the North Peckham Boys, the Yellow Brick Massive, the Outlaws, and the Acorn Boys. It's rumored that the larger Peckham Boys gang had originated in the 1970s. By the 90s, however, the 2 main gangs in Peckham included that of the Firehouse Crew, as well as YPB, or the Younger Peckham Boys. Later on, however, other gangs became prominent, like PYG, or PECKNARM Young Gunners, SI or Shoot Instant, and SN1, or Spare No One. During the 1990s and 2000s, the Peckham Boys had a very deadly gang feud with the Ghetto Boys from Deptford, as well as Brixton, all which will be discussed in detail within this video. Going into the 2000s, the Peckham Boys was subdivided into multiple subsets based around age range, example being PK or the Peckham Kids, the Younger Peckham Boys, as well as the Younger Peckham Boys. In the mid-2000s, however, new names of the various sets began to emerge, example being SN1, previously the Peckham Boys, PYG or PECKNARM Young Gunners, previously the Younger Peckham Boys, and SI or Shoot Instant, which was previously known as the Younger Peckham Boys, or YPB. Now, the Peckham Boys would be making a noise in the streets in the 1990s. It was going into the 2000s, however, that they became one of the most infamous gangs in London as a whole, even making national headlines at the start of the 2000s. In July 2000, a gunman from Peckham noticed a group of people standing outside of the Chicago nightclub within Peckham, southeast London. The gunman started firing indiscriminately into the crowd, hitting 9 people. Among the injured included a 15-year-old girl, as well as 4 other females. One man, who was 27, was found with 2 shots to the chest after the shooting, and was described as in critical condition. He, as well as the 8 others, were rushed to hospital, and luckily, all survived the attack. The crime was quickly reported due to how shocking it was, and at the time, this was one of the worst shootings that London had ever seen, shocking nearby communities. This Chicago nightclub, however, was known by Peckham gang members, and 6 months after this deadly shooting, a man was shot dead in a double shooting outside of the same Chicago nightclub. Because of this, it was believed that the nightclub shut down not too long after the violence had occurred. A prominent Peckham rapper known as Giggs, who will become a lot more relevant later, actually referenced this same nightclub in a later song, in which he claimed that he wasn't at the Chicago's nightclub to rave, but instead to catch his rivals with a big strap. Just a few months following this wave of violence, in November 2000, a 17-year-old was stabbed to death in a North Peckham estate. His body was later discovered in the back of a vehicle parked at King's College Hospital within South London. An investigation was launched after the attack, and a 17-year-old youth was later arrested and charged. However, I couldn't find if he was found guilty. Rest in peace. Only 9 days later, on the 27th of November 2000, the community would be shocked at the death of a 10-year-old schoolboy who was shockingly killed by young members of the Untouchables, which was a smaller gang located within Peckham. On the 27th of November 2000 at around 4:30 p.m., 10-year-old Damilola Taylor left Peckham Library and traveled toward the North Peckham estate. Whilst on his way home, he was surrounded by a gang of youths believed to be from the Untouchables gang. One of the youths then used a broken glass bottle and thrusted it toward 10-year-old Damilola Taylor's thigh, sadly resulting in him being stabbed. This wound severed an artery, however, and resulted in Damilola Taylor losing quite a lot of blood on the scene. He was found in the stairwell and was rushed to King's College Hospital, where he sadly died hours later. A murder investigation was then launched. However, it would take a few years for the people responsible to receive punishment. In 2002, 4 youths, including 2 16-year-old brothers, were arrested and even went on trial for the murder of 10-year-old Damilola Taylor. Following the trial, all 4 were acquitted of the murder, as the witness was supposedly unreliable. Police continued to investigate following this, and actually found Damilola Taylor's blood on a teen known as Danny Preddy's shoes. In 2005, both Danny Preddy and his brother Ricky Preddy, who were 16 and 17, were arrested, as well as another 19-year-old man. In 2006, the Preddy brothers were found guilty of Damilola's manslaughter, and were both sentenced to 8 years after being found guilty of Damilola's murder, with this case receiving widespread attention due to how shocking it was. Rest in peace, Damilola Taylor. It's believed that in 2000, a well-respected member of the Peckham Boys known as Tipsy, who was often credited to be one of the richest members of the Peckham Boys at the time. Anyways, he was arrested after being caught with firearms as well as drugs. He was charged and later sentenced to 10 years in prison for the incident. Despite Tipsy's 10-year sentence, however, he was later released in 2004, with this information becoming more relevant as the story goes on. Also around the early 2000s, the Peckham Boys began to consolidate as one large gang that was based off age range, example being YYPB, or Younger Peckham Boys, YPB, or Younger Peckham Boys, and finally SN1, which was believed to contain the olders in the gang. Now, fast forwarding to 2003, due to how large the Peckham Boys gang was, it began to brew. This mainly being due to the presence of a recently recruited Peckham Boys member known as Mender. See, Mender was previously associated with the Ghetto Boys, who were at war with the Peckham Boys at this time. He was later defected from the Ghetto Boys, however, and began to associate himself with their rivals, the Peckham Boys. It's even rumored that at one point, Mender robbed a member of the Peckham Boys. This factor, of course, meant that the membership of the Peckham Boys were split. Some took Mender's side, whilst others didn't agree with it and did not trust Mender at all. Sadly, in September 2003, Mender was approached by members believed to be from the Younger Peckham Boys gang. He was then stabbed in the chest by the members who fled seconds later. Emergency services rushed to Mender's aid. However, not long after being stabbed, he was pronounced dead. A murder investigation was launched, and a 17-year-old was sentenced to 11 years, whilst 2 other teens were given 7-year terms after being found guilty of Mender's manslaughter. Rest in peace, Mender. Shortly after this, in 2004, after serving around 3 years of his sentence, Peckham legend Tipsy was released in Cambridge to carry out a 4-week placement where he would be helping disabled people. Just a few days after being released, on the 3rd of July 2004 at around 7 p.m., Tipsy would be riding his motorcycle through Camberwell High Street when he was approached by rivals in a car and was rammed off his motorcycle. One of the rival gang members then exited the vehicle and stood over Tipsy, shooting him multiple times in the head and chest before the attackers fled seconds later. Tipsy was rushed to a nearby hospital, but was sadly pronounced
Boy
dead
got
on
rammed off
arrival,
his bike.
with yet another murder investigation being launched. Despite an investigation, as well as one arrest, the murder has actually remained unsolved. One man was charged, however his trial was discontinued and he was found not guilty, leaving
Case
the murder of
closed.
Tipsy unsolved. Rest in peace, Tipsy. Just a few months following this, in October 2004, the rivalry between the Peckham Boys and the Ghetto Boys was televised, when a group of Peckham Boys noticed rival Ghetto Boys outside of the Urban Music Awards, which was being held at the Barbican Centre in London. Shortly after both sides noticed one another, 18 shots would be fired by both groups. During this shooting, a 25-year-old innocent woman, Helen Kelly, was hit by a bullet that ricocheted off the wiring in her bra, changing directions and hitting her in the breast. Now, both groups of gang members dispersed shortly after the shooting, with Helen Kelly being rushed to a nearby hospital, where she luckily recovered and survived the attack. An investigation was launched, and later in 2005, 28-year-old Linton Ambersley was jailed for 12 years. Another 28-year-old man known as Tyron Headley was also jailed for assisting an offender. Going into 2005, Giggs, who hailed from the Peckham Boys gang, was released from prison following a 2.5-year prison sentence after allegedly being charged with a firearm offense in 2003. Anyways, shortly after he was released, the Peckham Boys gang became known under multiple new aliases. The Peckham Boys became known as SN1, which stood for Spare No One. The younger Peckham
Spare
Boys
no
became
one, not
known
a
as
soul.
SI, or Shoot Instant,
Instant
whilst the
shot.
youngest generation, the younger Peckham Boys, became known as PYG, or PECKNARM Young Gunners. So
Young
for
Gunners,
simplicity's sake, from now on, I'll refer to the gangs as these three main sets. Shortly after this, Giggs, who I just spoke about, began to experiment with music, often going to the studio and recording songs. Eventually, him alongside the SN1 gang released a 24-track mixtape titled Bloody Raw. Giggs actually had a track dedicated to him titled No 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 Freestyle, with this song celebrating his freeing from prison. Within this track, Giggs mainly rapped about females, as well as the streets of Peckham. This in fact was one of the first instances of Giggs releasing public music. However, later down the line, Giggs would become one of the biggest UK rappers coming out of Peckham. At the end of August 2005, 4 younger Peckham Boys, including Bertz, Tiny Ryder, Timmy, and Diamond, stormed a christening that was being held in Peckham. Bertz then used a gun and shot into the air. This bullet then ricocheted after being shot and hit an innocent woman who was cradling her baby. Sadly, this woman died shortly after being shot, with the younger Peckham Boys then robbing
Damn.
bystanders and fleeing seconds later. An investigation was launched. However, before police had any information on Bertz, he went on to kill again just weeks later. 2 weeks long. Shot, with the younger Peckham Boys then robbing bystanders and fleeing seconds later. An
Nigga shot
investigation
me.
was launched.
I'm gonna
However,
hit a
before
quick
police had any
stain.
information on Bertz, he went on to kill
And then
again just
dispersed.
weeks later. 2 weeks later, in September 2005, that same YPB member, Bertz, was traveling around Peckham. He noticed a well-known female member of the SN1 gang known as Ruthless. SN1 was actually closely associated with the younger Peckham Boys. This didn't matter to Bertz, however, who after noticing Ruthless, then pulled her out from a car and stabbed her multiple times in the heart. Sadly, she died minutes later. With another investigation
Nigga
being
stabbing the heart
launched,
and
Bertz
nigga
was
ain't got
quickly
no heart.
arrested
Look at
and
that.
charged with both murders. It was said in court that Bertz had attacked Ruthless due to the fact that she was heard disrespecting him on a phone call a day earlier. Bertz confessed to killing Ruthless, however never confessed to killing the innocent woman 2 weeks earlier. After a trial, however, Bertz was found guilty and was sentenced to 30 years in prison for both murders. Rest in peace. It's even believed that following the death of Ruthless, Giggs, also from the SN1 crew, released a track in her remembrance in 2008, this titled Ruthless Freestyle. Rest in peace. Now, in 2006, a large group of around 30 Shoot Instant gang members from Peckham traveled from their main turf onto the rival Ghetto Boys block. Upon reaching the block, the large group noticed the brother of 2 prominent Ghetto Boy members known as Smiler and Craver. This man was Jason Gale Bent, and was actually stabbed 10 years earlier, causing him to turn his back on the gang violence in the area. Anyways, after the large group of Shoot Instant members noticed Jason Gale Bent, one of them retrieved a firearm and shot toward him. A fight then broke out. However, during this fight, he was stabbed in the heart, with the Shoot Instant members fleeing seconds later. Jason Gale Bent staggered for a few minutes after the attack. However, he collapsed in his home and sadly died. Emergency services and police
were in
arrived
his
on the
house?
scene shortly following the attack. An investigation was launched. However, it's believed that the murder has remained unsolved, with the police connecting the murder of Jason Gale Bent to the attempted murder of another man in nearby Deptford only a few minutes later. Rest in peace, Jason Gale Bent. Following this, a week later, Ghetto Boys Boys would plan to carry out drive-by shootings outside of schools in Peckham in an attempt at killing YPB members thought to be behind the murder of Jason Gale Bent a week earlier. Their plans were interrupted, however, when police evacuated over 2,000 pupils from Peckham Academy, as well as Harris Girls Academy. The schools were later reopened a few days after the threats when police believed it was safe for the pupils to attend school. Peckham Boys in November 2006 were so influential within the streets, in fact, that they actually appeared in a Time Out magazine, being ranked among the top 100 most influential groups within London at the time, just showing how prominent they had become at the time. However, not everyone knew the violent backstory regarding the gang. That was only going to get worse and more deadly as the years went on.
Definitely getting worse.
In February
Sinead just better stop
2007,
there.
a group of Peckham gang members were arguing amongst one another, as they had allegedly pulled off a few successful robberies. However, some members didn't split any of the money with the others. Due to this, a group of Peckham members sought out other Peckham members. As a result of this, 15-year-old Michael Dosunmu was shot dead whilst in his bed, with this being a case of mistaken identity, as the attackers wanted to kill his older brother. Only days after this, however, 21-year-old Javari Crichton approached a group of Peckham members to discuss the money made from the robberies. After arriving at the agreed spot, he was stabbed to death by the Peckham gang members. Now, an investigation was launched into both murders. The killing of Javari Crichton remains unsolved. However, 2 men were jailed for 30 years in connection to the murder of Michael Dosunmu. The police linked both the murder of Javari Crichton and Michael Dosunmu together, and believed it was a result of an internal conflict within the Peckham Boys gang. Rest in peace, both Javari Crichton and Michael Dosunmu. Shortly after these 2 murders, in July 2007, a prominent member of the SN1 gang, known under the street name Raver, was arrested after his car was stopped by police. He was found in possession of a MAC-10 machine gun, 3 handguns, 2 silencers, 379 rounds of ammunition, 60,000 fake pills, and finally thousands of pounds of cocaine. During the trial, the handguns were investigated and were actually linked to 6 unsolved shootings in the months prior. In the end, however, Raver was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 10 years. Around 3 months following this incident, in October 2007, a group of
60,000 ecstasy pills that were fake. Somebody was about to get laced. Somebody was about to get laced. Oh my gosh. A Mac-10, nigga. Mac-10. He had a Mac-10. Brr. He had a Mac-10. He had a Mac-10 submachine gun. Cause 3 handguns, and a fucking 79 rounds of ammunition. 60,000 fake ecstasy pills. Are you crazy? And thousands of pounds worth of coke.
thousands of pounds of cocaine.
Oh my
3
days.
months following this incident,
That
in
nigga's
October
fat.
2007, a group of Peckham Boys
Shit,
noticed
get
a
me
group
linked
of
with him.
rival ghetto boys in New Cross. Both groups began to shoot toward each other. However, sadly during the shooting, an innocent nurse known as Madga Pniewska was hit and sadly died on the scene, with both groups dispersing after the shooting. Emergency services arrived shortly after the shooting. Upon arriving, an investigation was launched into the murder. A Ghetto Boys member known as Toner was arrested and charged. However, he didn't actually shoot Madga, but did know who did, and decided not to snitch, eventually being given 20 years for the incident. Rest in peace, Madga Pniewska. Shortly after this, on the 14th of
lot of
October
innocents began here,
2008,
bro.
a group of gang members from Woolwich approached a man and asked him where he was from. The man responded Peckham, and was then shot dead before he could say anything else. With the attackers fleeing shortly after the shooting, this murder has remained unsolved,
gotta say nothing
with
else,
police
bruh.
believing it was due to the rivalries that the Peckham gangs had gotten themselves into. It's also known that the man was believed to be innocent, and was not in fact involved with the Peckham gangs, but was from the area. Rest in peace. Now, at the end of 2007, Giggs released one of his first albums titled Ard Bodied. This album, in fact, featured one of his biggest songs titled Talkin' to Hardest, which has amassed over 46 million streams on Spotify and 11 million views on YouTube. This track is actually often credited to be the UK's unofficial national anthem, just showing how prominent Giggs had become within the UK rap scene. Now, during the summer months of 2008, both the Ghetto Boys and a member of the OPB gang, a subset of the Shoot Instant gang, known as Killa Kai, arranged to squash the beef between Ghetto and Peckham. The two gangs then decided to attend the Notting Hill Carnival. Around 180 members of both Ghetto and Peckham met each other and made their way toward the carnival. However, they were intercepted by police who thought that both Ghetto and Peckham were going to war one another. This was actually one of the biggest moments in Peckham, as now the gangs in Peckham were affiliated with the Ghetto Boys. Giggs rapped about this incident in the track titled Ruthless Freestyle, where he rapped Ghetto versus Peckham. I ain't on that dead beef, so I holla at my motherfucking guy Smiley. Killa Kai, who operated the link-up, also mentioned mentioned it, rapping, "I organized ghetto linking NARM. I made history. Darg, I'm a boss in the NARM. It was a southeast link-up. Anyhow, we got carny, it would have been nuts." The story of both the Peckham and ghetto beef was eventually adapted into a movie by Rapman titled Blue Story. This movie was an instant hit and was even nominated for multiple awards. Now, in 2008, whilst the gang feud between the Ghetto Boys and Peckham was no longer, the Peckham-based gangs had now found themselves in a rivalry with Brixton gangs like OC, which later became 410, as well as Gas, which was predominantly based around the Angeltown estate, which in itself has a long history of gangs on the estate. The most well-known gang that splintered off from Gas Gang was actually Get Back Gang, or 150, which in itself has become a very prominent gang within South London in recent years. This Peckham and Brixton rivalry became very deadly, very quickly, as you will see as this video goes on. Now, in August 2008, the first instance of this beef kicking off would occur only weeks after the two sides began to rival one another. In August 2008, a group of Brixton gang members believed to be from the OC gang would ride out onto Walworth Road within Walworth, SE17. The OC gang members from Brixton noticed two members of the Shoot Instant gang known as Snap Capone and Butch. After both Butch and Snap Capone noticed the OC members, they ran into a cost cutter store. However, the OC gang members began to fire toward them, hitting an innocent 18-year-old named Ryan Bravo, who was buying milk at the time. He was sadly pronounced dead seconds after being hit, with the Brixton gang members fleeing. It's rumored that an OC member known as Huss was later arrested for this brazen shooting and was handed 24 years. Huss was even remembered by SD from Harlem Spartans in 2022, with SD posting this on his story. Rest in peace, Ryan Bravo. A month later, in September 2008, police conducted multiple raids on high-ranking members of the Peckham Boys, leading to multiple arrests. Just under a month following these raids on prominent Peckham Boys, in October 2008, members associated with the Brixton gangs noticed 20-year-old Terms, who was a known SN1 member from Peckham. The Brixton members then shot dead Terms as he left his house. Rest in peace, Terms. Due to this, the Peckham and Brixton rivalry became very heated and was talk of the town in both Peckham and Brixton. If you would like a video on the Brixton gangs in the future, let me know in the comments below. Now, around this time, Giggs from the SN1 gang was actually making waves in the UK road rap scene, previously dropping his debut album Walk Into Park earlier in 2008. This album in fact further shone a spotlight on Giggs, who was already gaining a buzz off the back of his track Talkin' to Hardest. In November 2008, Giggs was actually nominated for the BET Awards, eventually winning the Best UK Hip-Hop Act, which was a crazy accomplishment for Giggs, as he was one of the pioneers of the UK road rap scene, as was SN1 as a whole group. Sadly, however, even though all of these new eyes were looking in on the Peckham-based collective, there was still a war brewing in the streets, and in 2009, the war continued. In February 2009, 25-year-old Big Larry, who was—
Nigga said that shit like it was just meant to stop, like the year ends, okay, the beef ends. Nah, bro. That shit, even if it doesn't matter how crazy it was on the 31st, on the 1st, somebody else was getting dropped.
is alleged to have been a well-respected Peckham older, would be walking down a street in Dulwich when a gunman, believed to be from the SN1 gang, approached him from behind. The gunman then shot 25-year-old Big Larry in the head, killing him instantly. It's rumored that Big Larry actually had a falling out with other Peckham gang members, eventually leading to his death, as he was once a well-known Peckham gang member. An investigation was launched into his murder. However, despite an entire investigation, the murder of Big Larry remains unsolved. Rest in peace, Big Larry. Now, during 2009, police would be looking into one of the Peckham gangs, this being PYG, as they, as well as the other Peckham gangs like SN1 and OPB, had been in an ongoing war with Brixton around this time. Anyways, the solicitors of these PYG members had actually been given access to CCTV that showed both Peckham members as well as Brixton members riding out onto one another. It's rumored that an associate of one of the Peckham gangs then accessed the CCTV and uploaded it onto YouTube, where it gained thousands of views. OC members from Brixton later rapped about this, dissing the PYG gang and calling them the police as they had access to the CCTV footage.
Editors, pussios! CCTV!
Man's working in the J, man. Man's working with the fucking J.
Tried it, young gunners.
Man came, man done our thing, man working with the J.
Following this, in November 2009, 22-year-old Daniel Duke, or Mimer, who was allegedly associated with the MOB gang, which was an acronym for Mandem on Brandon, this being a crew originating from the Brandon estate, SE17, which was later popularized after Moscow. 17 began to become more prominent on the estate. Anyways, 22-year-old Mimer was shot 3 times near an underground station within Kennington, South London. Police and emergency services quickly arrived on the scene and transported
The UK is dark, fam. It's dark. It's dark as shit. It could be 5 o'clock and it'll be dark. It could be 1 p.m. It'll be dark. It could be 6 a.m. It will be dark. That place is treacherous.
22-year-old mimer to a nearby hospital, where he was sadly pronounced dead later that same day. An investigation was launched shortly after his murder, with 2 rumored Shoot Instant members from Peckham being arrested and charged in connection. However, following a trial, both were acquitted of the murder charge and were let free. Rest in peace, Daniel Duke, or Mimer. At the end of 2009 and start of 2010, the Peckham Boys were basically the most well-known gang in London, often disrupting police and the community. The Peckham Boys were even seen having a snowball fight with Met police officers in an old video, which has since been recovered from around the end of 2009. This snowball fight actually led to the police retreating back into their van and closing the door, where the Peckham Boys continued to throw snowballs at them, even pulling the door back open. Now, going into 2010, the war between Peckham and Brixton quickly became one of the most talked about on the streets at the time, with the Peckham gangs even beginning to rival one another at one point in 2010, with the gang from Letsam splintering off and rivaling the rest of Peckham. Now, during 2010, a prominent Shoot Instant member known as Nutty was on remand after allegedly purchasing guns in a different town. He didn't act alone, however, and a separate 17-year-old known as Samuel was also facing charges, however was let out under investigation. Nutty then offered Samuel money to take the fall on the gun charge at the trial. However, Samuel denied this, and in June 2010, only days before the trial was set to start, Samuel was shot dead by Peckham gang members in a car. The car was then set on fire by a PYG member known as CS, with Samuel still being inside the vehicle. This then led to yet another murder investigation being launched. Police quickly connected this incident to the gun charge, and even charged Shoot Instant member Nutty for the murder of Samuel. They also charged CS for burning the car used in the attack. And following a lengthy trial, Nutty was sentenced to life with a minimum of 32 years for arranging. And following a lengthy trial, Nutty was sentenced.
Gang member jail for execution of Samuel Ogurna, bro. Damn, bro. That nigga was not trying to take that charge. Hey, take the charge, bro. I'll give you 5 racks. Hey, take it, bro. 5 racks. We can go to Australia. You can just move. You can just change your whole life. Go Australia. It'll be $10,000. Just go, bro. Just go, bro. Just go. No, bro. No. Keep your money, dude. We're just gonna bang it out together. Trust me. The nigga said, fuck that shit. Your ass died today.
Sentenced to life with a minimum of 32 years for arranging the murder of Samuel, while CS was sentenced to 4 years for discarding of the car. Rest in peace, Samuel. Now, one of the main blocks that identified with the Peckham Boys was that of the Letsam estate, which around the 2010s splintered off from the Peckham gangs like PYG, SN1, OPB, and SI or Shoot Instant. The gang from the Letsam estate then became known as the Letsam Gs, with this gang going on to rival their old friends from Peckham. Around this time, the PYG or PECKNARM Young Gunners gang became more prominently known under the name Anti. This war between Peckham and Letsam then got very deadly as the year 2010 went on. On the 6th of September 2010, a shooting took place on the Letsam estate. It's rumored the shooting was carried out by alleged Peckham gang members onto rivals from the Letsam Gs. Luckily, however, no one was injured during the shooting, and just a few hours later, a member of the OPB gang known as Taz from Peckham sadly died after his bike was hit by a car within Peckham. Later that same day, after a mural was constructed for Taz, a member of the Letsam gang known as Lil Grem would visit his mural to pay his respects to the fallen member. Upon arriving, however, Lil Grem was gunned down by a Peckham gang member known as Snap, who was in fact the older of Snap Capone. Snap was later arrested for his murder and was sentenced to 35 years for the killing of Lil Grem. Rest in peace, both Taz and Lil Grem. Now, the Peckham Boys, as well as their rivalries, were not the only heated gang feuds in London around this time, and about a 40-minute drive away, 2 groups of gangs in Newham would also be battling it out in the streets. However, I have made a video on this rivalry, so feel free to check it out. Anyways, one of the people killed within this rivalry was Ace, who was an alleged custom house member. His killer was rumored to have been a CGE member known as Sammy Guns. I am saying this because, in October 2010, Sammy Guns got himself into a rivalry with SN1 and anti-gang members. These Peckham members then rode out onto Newham and noticed 16-year-old Sammy Guns shooting him dead on the scene, before fleeing moments later. An investigation was launched, however the murder has remained unsolved. Rest in peace, Sammy Guns. Shortly after this, in December 2010, 3 gang members known as Vesta, Cookie, and Tiny Mantis, who were rumored rumored to have been from the Crane Block gang, which previously splintered off from the Peckham gangs, and actually started to rival the Peckham Boys. The three were chilling on the Pelican Estate, which was the main block for the Crane Block gang. Whilst on the estate, a group of alleged Peckham Boys noticed Vesta, who was shot dead. Both Cookie and Tiny Mantis were then stabbed multiple times. Luckily, both Cookie and Tiny Mantis survived. However, Vesta sadly died, with another murder investigation being launched. Whilst police were investigating the murder, dozens of stop snitching leaflets were handed out to residents of the Pelican Estate. However, despite this, an anti-member known as Tiny Nutty and a GMG member known as Jungle were arrested in connection to the murder. Both were charged and eventually found guilty, both being sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 26 and 30 years. Rest in peace, Vesta. Going into 2011, a group of young gang members from Peckham began to experiment with music, this being PK, which is rumored to be an acronym for Peckham Kids. One of the more prominent members of PK was that of Killer Reeks, who released a freestyle in 2010, this garnering around 14,000 views since its release. Despite this, however, going into 2011, the war involving the gangs from Peckham, as well as their rivals from Brixton, would only worsen, with shootings, stabbings, and murders becoming a common occurrence within the streets of Peckham. Now, in 2011, a gang from the Summerley in Brixton, known as MZ, would be making noise in the streets. At the time, MZ was linked up with Gas, also from Brixton. However, later down the line, the two gangs would split and start rivaling one another. I'm saying this because, in 2011, a prominent member of this MZ gang, known as Josie, was sadly killed in a car accident. This death affected Brixton heavily. It's even known that Josie was close with Sneakbo, who has gotten millions of views on his songs. Anyways, a few months after Josie's death, in November 2011, his funeral was set to take place in East Dulwich. Whilst the funeral was in session, however, an anti-member was in the area and noticed the large group of people mourning the loss of Josie. The anti-member then shot a man present at the funeral 6 times at point-blank range, killing him on the scene. It's rumored another man was also shot, but luckily survived. An investigation was swiftly launched, and 3 men were arrested. However, all 3 went on to later be released as there was insufficient evidence to charge them, with this murder remaining unsolved. Rest in peace. Also, around this time at the end of November 2011, an old road rap video, presumably recorded in the years prior, was uploaded onto YouTube. This video featured Giggs, as well as dozens of other Peckham Boys rapping on their block. Something that made this crazy, though, was the fact that during the rap video, a gunshot can be heard in the background, with Giggs seemingly not flinching at all. Also, dozens of guns were shown within the video, which is something that can nowadays carry a very long sentence if found in possession in the United Kingdom.
Your workers saying shit, getting flipped for the cheapest. Now the streets ain't the same, we hurt the market.
Going into 2012, however, a large amount of the Peckham Boys were arrested in different cases, resulting in the youngers taking over and releasing music. Now, in February 2012, Giggs was actually stopped by police whilst in a car. The car was then searched, and an illegal firearm was recovered. Giggs was then arrested, and was on remand for around 6 months before the case was dropped, as the driver had even admitted to owning the gun. Giggs was acquitted and released toward the end of 2012. Also, around the start of 2012, some PYG gang members fell out with one another. This then resulted in a small group of members splintering off and creating a new gang known as Breadset. These Breadset gang members then rivaling their old friends from the Peckham sets. Now, following this, 2 teenagers from Peckham began to drop freestyles, these being Nutcase, who later became Quengface, as well as Preacher, who later started rapping under the name PS. In April 2012, Preacher or PS dropped a My Time session on YouTube, with this garnering just under 10,000 views. A few months later, in June 2012, Nutcase or Quengface also dropped a freestyle, in which you can actually hear him shouting out MOB or Mandem on Brandon. Following this release, in August 2012, Preacher and Young Rids dropped a MMTV freestyle, currently sitting on around 4.5 thousand views. In October 2012, armed police carried out multiple raids on prominent members of the Peckham Breadset gang. During these raids, an M16 rifle was seized, as well as 40,000 pounds of drugs. 2 gang members were then arrested and charged, and in 2013 were later sentenced in relation to the raids. Now, remember how I said that Preacher and Nutcase or Narsty were rapping around this time? Well, they were associated with a younger Peckham set known as 365 or Dank Boys, which you may have heard of, as this 365 gang later became known as Zone 2. Anyways, this 365 gang started to take music seriously around 2013. In January 2013, Young Mares and Dens, who later became known as D Squeezo, released a track titled Pumped Up. Nutcase or Quengface then dropped a track titled Pour It Up in May 2013. It's rumored, in fact, that during this music video, video, multiple other 365 members can be seen. A month later in June 2013, Preacher or PS and Rids dropped a track titled Dream Chasers. Something that made this track eerie when looking back on it was the fact that the top comment on the video was by a commenter named Raheem Barton, and if you are familiar with UK drill, you will know that this was GB from Moscow 17, who at the time was friends with Preacher and Rids, with the comment saying Preacher and Rids going in as usual. Sadly, however, due to the gang politics in the area, GB was later killed by Peckham gang members in 2018, this being the height of the Zone 2 and Moscow 17 rivalry. However, I'll talk about this later. Now, at the start of 2014, the violence between Peckham gangs as well as their rivals continued, and in February 2014, the rivalry between Peckham gangs and ABM from Stockwell began to get heated. On the 7th of February 2014, 22-year-old Sykes, who also was known as Tiny Gigs, would be on Clapham Road near Stockwell Tube Station. At around 5:30 p.m., Sykes was stabbed by alleged ABM members from Stockwell, sadly dying only moments later, which is crazy, as previously Stockwell and the Peckham Boys were affiliated with one another. Shortly after this, a member of the Peckham bread set retaliated and got into a fight with an ABM member in prison. With this,
there's a whole lot of beef between like inner circles. Like it's crazy. Like you could be homies with a nigga one day and then like you guys know do you guys know how there's like there be circles inside circles, like there be inner circles, like, and them circles be stronger than the actual bigger circle in general. So when these inner circles, you know, do cut off from the gang or do separate from the gang, and then they start beefing, that's when it gets hectic for real. Man, cap.
Even being recorded and uploaded onto YouTube. Rest in peace, Sykes. Following this, at the end of 2014, an anti-member from Peckham, known as M1, would be arrested after he was in a police chase in Peckham. During his arrest, he was discovered in possession of a loaded shotgun. M1 was charged with possession of a firearm with intent to cause fear of violence, possessing a prohibited weapon, and finally dangerous driving. In March 2015, M1 was found guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, with the judge stating he had links to a gang in Southwark, as well as deeming him a dangerous person, and sentencing him to a further 3 years if he is still deemed dangerous at the end of his sentence. Now, as 2015 rolled around, the 365 crew, whose membership was mainly the youngest generation of Peckham, were making noise in the streets. It's believed, however, that at some point in 2015, 365 began to go by the name Zone 2. The main members of this gang included Quengface, previously Nutcase, PS, previously Preacher, and D Squeezo. This Zone 2 gang was actually affiliated with Moscow 17 from the nearby Brandon estate at the time, with it even being known that prominent Zone 2 members can be seen in Moscow's 17-member Incognito's Rico music video, released in November 2015. Following the release of this track, however, both Zone 2 and Moscow 17 began to rival one another, this feud quickly becoming the deadliest beef in the borough. It's alleged that around the beginning of 2016, a prominent member of Zone 2, known as PS, would rob the cousin of Loose Screw, who was a Moscow 17 member. After Loose Screw found out that his cousin had been robbed by PS, the pair had a fight, with it being believed that flick knives were drawn. However, no one was seriously injured. A Moscow 17 member known as Tizzy T attempted to resolve the tension between both sides, however ended up being stabbed by a Zone 2 gang member. Tizzy T was actually pronounced dead on the scene for a short period of time, but by a miracle was brought back to life by paramedics. It's rumored that following this, Zone 2 and Moscow 17, who were once allied, now had a rivalry with one another due to the stabbing of Tizzy T. Now, it's also important to note that another gang was and has since become prominent within Peckham, this being HSQ or HS, which is an acronym for Hit Squad, and is believed to be a sub-gang containing Zone 2's most dangerous and active members. Their most prominent member is that of PS. Zone 2 are also affiliated with YPB, or Younger Peckham Boys, who also have prominent rappers like Gully. Now, going into 2016, the UK drill scene was seriously exploding, with 6-7 from Brixton beginning to really shine in the scene. The collective dropped a track titled Take It There in August 2015, as well as Live Corn by LD at the end of 2014, both of these tracks gaining millions of views and streams. Gigs from SN1 saw this group of rappers who were making waves in the UK drill scene and hopped on a feature with them. This track was later released in February 2016 and was titled Let's Lurk. This track was an instant hit and has since garnered around 22 million views on YouTube and 19 million streams on Spotify. Anyways, in March 2016, Shoot Instant member Snap Capone, who had been making noise in the UK drill scene, previously dropped dropping tracks like his daily duppy. Anyways, he was arrested in connection to a massive county lines operation, with it being believed that they were running drugs from Southampton to London. Snap Capone was charged in relation to this, and was eventually found guilty and sentenced to 6 years for the drug trafficking. Now, during 2016, the rivalry between Zone 2 and Moscow 17 would be raging. This was first seen in June 2016, when 15-year-old Rizzy Ramps from Moscow 17 was noticed by 2 members of the Zone 2 gang. Rizzy Ramps was then chased through a fun fair in Burgess Park, which is actually the park that separates Zone 2 territory and Moscow 17 territory. Rizzy Ramps was stabbed multiple times in the stomach and back. The injuries were so severe, in fact, that it's even known that his organs were exposed. An air ambulance arrived on the scene shortly after the attack and transported 15-year-old Rizzy Ramps to hospital, where he luckily survived. 3 weeks after this, at the start of July 2016, prominent Moscow 17 member Knockout Ned would be in a Camberwell McDonald's at around midnight. A Zone 2 member then noticed him. The Zone 2 gang member then ran inside the McDonald's and stabbed Knockout Ned in the neck. Police and emergency services were called to the scene seconds after the attack, and Ned was rushed to a hospital where he luckily survived. This incident was later rapped about in a Zone 2 track titled No Censor, in which Unruly Bad rapped, "Ned just wanted a cheeseburger. Max, what you do that for? Knockout's juice gets spilled on the floor. Huh, you just started a war." This bar potentially meant that the stabbing of Ned had now marked
Zone 2, No Censor. It's a crazy song. Like, I know that shit had the UK bumping for real. You just started a war. Yeah. That's indeed what you did, mate.
a war between Zone 2 and Moscow 17, which was only going to get worse as the months went on. A few weeks following the stabbing of Knockout Ned, on the 21st of July 2016, Giggs released the track Whippin' Excursion. This track was also a hit for Giggs, and has garnered around 15 million YouTube views and 21 million Spotify streams. Also around this time, another rapper was making a huge noise in the UK drill scene, this being Shoki, who was affiliated with the 814 gang from Lewisham. This 814 gang was actually a splintered off set from the larger Ghetto Boys. Anyways, on the 4th of August 2016, Shoki released a Daily Duppy freestyle, which was taken extremely well and has since garnered around 2.5 million views. Sadly, however, Shoki wasn't able to see this success, as a day later, on the 5th of August 2016, Shoki was killed by a gang member from a Peckham-based set known as SNR. This SNR gang was once affiliated with the Peckham Boys as well as YPB, however it's since believed that they have come to rival one another. On the 5th of August 2016, 16-year-old Shoki, or Leoandro Osameki, as well as a few hundred other teens, attended a house party hosted by a 16-year-old girl in Peckham. Around 25 seconds after arriving at the house party, a 15
when you're in the middle of a war still, yeah, and you're going to a house party, it doesn't matter how deep you are. Actually, it could, but if you're attending a house party, all your boys and that, hey man, it's not gonna end well, especially when it's the girl. You know, she probably invited a couple niggas from that side, a couple niggas from the other side, a couple niggas from 5 different hoods, 20 different hoods. Like, it's not looking good, man. Especially in the middle of a war. There's 50 blocks all around you. Your block's in the middle. Bang! You go to the house party. You go outside. You see 500 people waiting for your ass. All your ops waiting for your ass. Or would they fucking shkling, wishkling, pulling out their shkling. They fucking samurais. Oh my.
15-year-old gang member from the SNR gang based in Peckham got into an argument with Shoki. This argument sadly ended in 16-year-old Shoki being stabbed twice in the chest by the SNR member. The attacker then fled and jumped a fence, running home. Police and emergency services were then called to the scene. Sadly, however, 30 minutes after arriving at the party and being attacked, Shoki was pronounced dead on the scene. A murder investigation was then launched, with the news that Shoki had died beginning to fly around social media. A 15-year-old boy was arrested 2 days after, in connection to his murder, and was charged with Shoki's murder. In the end, however, after a full trial, the 15-year-old claimed self-defense and was acquitted of the murder in 2017. Rest in peace, Shoki. Since his killer's release from prison, he has featured in multiple interviews that show his side of the story. The SNR member has also got music videos on YouTube that have since garnered hundreds of thousands of views. It's believed, however, that if Shoki was still alive today, he would have been one of, if not the biggest UK drill rapper. Dave even paid tribute to Shoki on Instagram and had even shouted him out on previous tracks, example being Thiago Silva, in which he rapped S with the S from the S. Ask Shoki Dustman down with a mask like Toby. Rest in peace, Shoki. Later in September 2016, Dave released his his highly anticipated EP titled 6 Paths. This EP featured 6 tracks that all have garnered millions of views and streams. On song 4, titled Breathe, Dave actually made a reference to the Peckham gangs and their feud with Brixton, in which he rapped, "Man jump off road, they wanna judge, man. Same man say, free my G's, can't ever tell my young boys trap I ain't cool with the gas like PYG." PYG being a Peckham gang known as PECKNARM Young Gunners. Nearing the end of 2016, Zone 2 really started to shine within the UK drill scene. In August 2016, Narsty or Quengface, P or PS, and Scully released a track titled 2 Flows. This track was seriously cold and rude. During the first verse, PS questioned why he was beefing Moscow 17, rapping, "But it's 10-0, someone still tell me why I'm beefing these neeks." Zone 2 then ended the year with a end-of-year freestyle. This freestyle featured Narsty or Quengface, Denz, who was now going by D Squeezo, as well as his younger Young D Squeezo, with this freestyle garnering just under 100,000 views. Zone 2 weren't the only ones making noise, however, and also around this time, 2 members of Moscow 17 who were directly opposing them, being GB and Loose, released a track titled Moscow March. This was a seriously cold track and featured multiple disrespectful lyrics aimed toward the Zone 2 gang. Sadly, however, only days following the release of these tracks, another person was killed as a result of an internal conflict with the Peckham gangs. On New Year's Eve 2016, 24-year-old Robo or Tiny Blacks was chased through Peckham by alleged Peckham gang members. Sadly, he was stabbed multiple times. Emergency services were called to the scene. However, sadly, only minutes after he was stabbed, 24-year-old Tiny Blacks was pronounced dead. A post-mortem examination determined his cause of death was multiple knife wounds. Yet another murder investigation was launched. It's rumored that the death of Tiny Blacks was a result of an internal dispute within Peckham gangs. Tiny Blacks was actually loved in Peckham and had supposedly featured in multiple music videos. Rest in peace, Robo or Tiny Blacks. In March 2017, Giggs featured twice on Drake's 2017 album titled More Life. One of the songs was titled No Long Talk and currently sits on 136 million views, whilst the second, titled KMT, has garnered around 185 million Spotify streams, which is crazy as this just shows how big Giggs has become. Despite this, however, the war between Peckham's Zone 2 and Moscow 17 began to get deadly in 2017 and 18. On the 5th of June 2017, 17-year-old Abdurrahman Mohammed, or Abs, who was believed to not be in fact involved with any of the local gangs, but was rumored to be related to members of Zone 2. Anyways, 2 members of the Moscow 17 gang would be riding around Peckham, looking for rivals. After a few minutes, the pair noticed 17-year-old Abs, who wasn't believed to be a member of the Zone 2 gang. The Moscow 17 members then chased Abs after noticing him. Abs made it a few meters, before he was sadly stabbed in the heart by the Moscow 17 members, with the attackers then fleeing. Emergency services arrived on the scene and tried to save his life. However, despite the best attempts of medical professionals, sadly 17-year-old Abs was pronounced dead, with a murder investigation being launched. Both Incognito as well as Jet Black from the Moscow 17 gang were arrested and charged for the murder. The pair went on trial. However, following a long trial, both were acquitted and released from prison. Rest in peace, Abs. Later in July 2017, Zone 2 released one of their first albums titled No Hook. This album featured 7 songs that have all gained hundreds of thousands of views. Standout tracks on this album include No Hook, featuring Quengface, PS, and Trizak. This track even getting a music video. Zone 2 Step, featuring PS, Quengface, Trizak, and Scully. And finally, Most Hated, featuring Quengface and PS. This album really put the Zone 2 collective on the map and gained them a lot of attention within the streets, leading to them becoming one of the biggest UK drill groups out at the time. Zone 2 weren't the only ones releasing albums around this time, and in October 2017, Giggs released his album titled Womp 2 Dem. This was a 13-song album and had features from Popcorn, DEE, Dave, and Young Thug, which is crazy. Also around this time, it appeared that Zone 2 and 410 had seemingly stopped rivaling one another and made a song, because remember, OC from Brixton later became known as 410, whilst the Peckham Boys gangs became known as Zone 2. This meant that after decades of rivaling one another, the younger generations of Brixton as well as Peckham simply stopped the decade-long feud and linked up in the studio, releasing a Voice of the Streets freestyle, which has since garnered around 1.3 million views. Both groups dropped another track in 2021 titled No Fibs, this sitting on just under 1 million views. Recently, CS, who was a Peckham OG, actually responded to this link-up on Snapchat, writing Zone 2, X410, Lul, the game has changed. Now, going into 2018, rappers like Quengface would be dropping serious UK drill bangers. Quengface started the year by releasing a track titled Tour de Op Block. This song has since become a UK drill classic, garnering 1.4 million views. Quengface followed this up with a track titled Three Stripes, which has also gained a good amount of attention, currently sitting on around 2.4 million views. Within this song, he mentioned that he didn't mind sliding on a Spartan, or a Harlem Spartan, which was a gang from Kennington. Despite this, however, the war between Zone 2 and Moscow 17 was still raging, with it becoming a common occurrence to see Snapchats portraying both sides riding out onto each other. One of these in fact portrayed Zone 2 members traveling around the Brandon estate, home to the Moscow 17 gang, and pressuring anyone they drove past. Sadly, however, days later, a Moscow 17 member was shot dead by alleged Zone 2 gang members, this being GB, who was even once friends with Zone 2 members, before both sides began to rival one another. On the 5th of May 2018, 4 gang members allegedly associated with Zone 2 would be driving around the Brandon estate. The 4 Zone 2 members noticed a group of Moscow 17 members. It's rumored that within the group was GB, as well as other prominent Moscow members. Whilst driving past, the Zone 2 members retrieved guns and started firing from their moving car. GB was struck twice, and sadly died seconds later in the arms of another Moscow member known as Incognito. It's rumored in fact that the Zone 2 members actually wanted to kill Incognito. An investigation was swiftly launched. However, despite an entire investigation, little to no arrests have been made in connection to the murder of GB. His friends and family were quick to mourn him, even marching to his track, Moscow March. Rest in peace, GB. A few days following the death of GB, his close friend Incognito released a tribute track titled Blessed, with this currently sitting on around 3 million views. Within this song, Incognito paid his tribute to GB, as well as dissing rival Zone 2 members. Sadly, however, just a few months later, Incognito as well would fall victim to the streets. Around a month following this, in June 2018, 2 Zone 2 members, known as D Squeezo and Lil D Squeezo, approached a man they thought to be trapping. This man was known as SJ. An altercation between SJ and the 2 Zone 2 members then ensued. Sadly, SJ was stabbed multiple times by the pair, who then fled after the attack. Sadly, SJ was pronounced dead after emergency services rushed to his aid, with yet another murder investigation being launched. Not long after the murder of SJ, D Squeezo was arrested and charged, as well as his younger Lil D Squeezo, who was also charged. The pair were found guilty, and D Squeezo was sentenced to 27 years, whilst Lil D Squeezo was given 15 years. Rest in peace, SJ. Around a month following this, in August 2018, Incognito from Moscow 17, who was one of the group's biggest rappers, would be chilling with a younger Moscow 17 member on the Brandon estate. Whilst on the estate, the pair noticed a man wearing a Rolex, both Incognito as well as the younger member, then walked towards the man, attempting to rob his Rolex. What they weren't expecting, however, was the fact that the man had retrieved a lock knife. Incognito was then chased for a few seconds by the man, as it's rumored he was unarmed. Incognito was stabbed twice in the neck, with the younger Moscow member fighting back and stabbing the man. Despite this, however, Incognito was pronounced dead moments later, whilst the man sought medical attention and recovered in hospital. Shortly after the attack, Kenneth Umezi, who is believed to not have been involved with the local gangs, was arrested and charged in connection to the murder, however was later acquitted under the basis of self-defense. Rest in peace, Incognito. Now, during 2018, Peckham legend Killa Kai, who was credited to have organized the link-up between both Ghetto and Peckham in the summer of 2008. Anyways, Killa Kai returned to the UK drill scene in 2018, dropping the track titled History of Peckham, whereas I'm sure you can tell, he rapped about the history of the Peckham Boys, as well as the other gangs. Within this track, he stated that he takes it old school, and it was SI or Shoot Instant to PYG, or PECKNARM Young Gunners, 2 heavily influential sets involved with the history of Peckham's gangs. Now, at the end of 2018, Quengface released his highly anticipated Lightwork freestyle. Within this track, he stated that all of his ops were tired and needed to retire, as they were screaming PECKNARM K or PECKNARM Killer, but no Zone 2 members had been killed. This freestyle was quickly removed from YouTube, but has since been saved and re-uploaded. Despite this, however, it currently sits on 3 million Spotify streams, which is crazy. 2018 was also the year that other rappers from Zone 2 began to make noise. Example being Karma, Mad Max, and Snoop, who all did numbers around this time. Now, going into 2019, another Peckham legend known as Raver was released following his July 2007 arrest and sentencing. Upon his release, he began to release music, with these songs raking in hundreds of thousands of views. Now, it's rumored that in 2019, PS from Zone 2 or Hit Squad often posted up in Edmonton dissing the Edmonton-based gang 3x3. This was mainly due to the fact that PS was banned from Peckham and had to live with his mum in Edmonton for a few months. Anyways, during 2019, E1 from 3x3 would end up catching PS lacking, with the entire incident being recorded by E1 and ZT. The pair then made PS run, with E1 and ZT chasing him on camera.
I don't care about all of these, your beef in it. I don't care about you lot's beef. I got beef down south, bro. I got bare beef down south. I don't care about you lot's beef.
Say that in PS.
You get me?
Mum's life. This Edmonton, E1, ZT. You're gonna hear about us. You're gonna hear about us. Even Trizak. I see Trizak making Trizak's making cheeky snaps as well. What's Trizak on?
It's not cheeky. You lot are moving.
Fam,
you lot are moving mad.
What do you mean moving mad, bro? You're coming to a hood. Do you see us coming to Peckham and do these cheeky snaps?
You don't come.
Bro, we don't come to Peckham and do these snaps, bro. We don't come to Peckham. PS! 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 Zone 2!
Days following this incident, members of 3x3 would go to PS's mum's house and would kick down her door while she was inside with PS.
Look at this silly boy, PS.
Hey, Preacher, come outside.
Hey, silly.
Hey, come outside.
Ask him if his mum's front door's alright, mate.
Mash up.
It's rumored that following this, alleged Zone 2 members then retaliated and shot up Edmonton. This is something that was later wrapped in Zone 2's disrespectful track No Censor, released in December 2019, in which Quengface rapped, PS just shot up the 9, now man's doing up cheeky snaps. E1 later responded to this bar in his popular track Enfield or Tottenham, where he rapped, apparently you shot up the 9, PS tell me who you slapped. You weren't doing up cheeky snaps. When you bucked me in Zeds, you was doing up dash. Panic heart attack, when you saw the GMs outside of your mums. The No Censor track was actually released not long after these incidents, and featured the Zone 2 rappers Unruly Bad, Karma, Quengface, Trizak, B Gotti, and LR. This song made a huge wave in the scene due to how rude it was. As I'm sure you can tell by the name of the song, this track really had no censors, which was something UK drill listeners had gotten used to listening to around this time. As UK drill was beginning to become heavily censored around this time, Moscow's 17 members, as well as Harlem members, linked up following this, and released a response track titled He's Dead, this also garnering millions of views. Going into 2020, another rapper from Peckham began to make noise in the streets, this being Gully, who was a breath of fresh air in the UK drill scene, having some of the coldest flows and ad-libs I think I've ever heard. In August 2020, he dropped the track Video Vixen, garnering 309,000 views. A month later, he dropped Yingdat, which actually got a remix in November 2020. This remix featuring Trizak, Backroad G, Tollers, and PS Hit Squad. This sitting on around 650,000 views, which was very impressive. Despite these views, however, in 2022, Gully found himself wrapped up in a murder case, which has since been taken to trial, and has resulted in Gully being given a life sentence, meaning that he somewhat threw his promising music career away. On the 16th of July 2022, 19-year-old LJ, who was allegedly associated with the DQN crew, was sitting in his car. Whilst in his car, Gully approached him and asked what ends he was from. By the time LJ had replied, he was stabbed twice in the neck, with the attacker fleeing seconds later. Despite the injuries, LJ transported himself to hospital, where he was sadly pronounced dead that same day, with another murder investigation being launched. Just hours following this attack, Gully was on an Instagram Live talking to his fans, when all of a sudden police raided his home and placed him under arrest for the murder.
I'm naked. Can I get dressed?
Someone get a towel, someone.
I'm naked. There's clothes in the living room.
Keep coming down. Keep coming down.
There's clothes in the living room. Let me get dressed, man.
Keep coming down. Keep coming down.
Let me get dressed. Look, I'm dressed. I'm dressed. Let me get
Stop
dressed.
there. Stop there.
Oh my God,
Stop.
you're mad.
Take 2 steps forward. Take 2 steps forward.
Boss, I'm not
Listen,
moving. I'm not
listen.
moving.
You know when the police say, freeze, freeze, stop right there, get on the ground. I don't know what about that, but that shit is just fucked up. They just have the power, they just aim it at you. Stop right there. This is the most fucked part about all this shit.
Godfrey, you're under arrest for murder, okay? Listen
moving.
exactly what I'm saying. Put the phone on that radiator. Put the phone on the radiator. Do not make any sudden move.
Gully was found guilty of the murder and was sentenced to life with a minimum of 24 years, which is crazy, as Gully could have made it out with music but chose to focus on the road life. Rest in peace, LJ. In August 2022, SD from Harlem paid respect to Huss from OC, which was the Brixton gang that later became known as 410. Huss was actually the one charged and found guilty for the incident that resulted in an innocent man being gunned down when Brixton members noticed Snap Capone and Butch in August 2008. Also in 2022, Quengface and CB released 2 tracks, one titled Machines and the other Plankton, both garnering hundreds of thousands of views. Quangface wasn't done there, however, and around the end of 2022, he as well as Giggs were spotted on social media blocking off roads in Peckham for a music video. This music video was titled Water and was later released in March 2023, currently sitting on just under 3 million views. In behind-the-scene images, around 150 Peckham gang members can be seen blocking off roads for the music video. Now this brings me to the end of today's video. If you have learned anything from this video, make sure that it's to stay out of the streets and or as far away from them as possible, as this road life you see these rappers living is very fake and only ever leads to jail or death. By the time that some of these big rappers realize this, however, they are either dead or in jail. As always, rest in peace to everyone mentioned within this video. My thoughts and prayers go out to the friends and family of anyone I mentioned in this video. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe as it helps me create better content.
Well, that's a wrap. Stay tuned. Hold on, wait a minute. I'm just gonna trap into another 30-minute video. That was an hour-long video reacting to London's most deadliest gangs, or almost deadliest gang, PECKNARM. Oh, they've been around for over 25 years. Shit ain't finna just stop now. Shit just keeps getting more wicked and more wicked and more wicked. So I'm just saying, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, drop a comment on what type of videos you guys would like to see. I've got another video coming out, and that should be coming out maybe sometime tomorrow. Today is indeed the 6th, so you should expect a video coming out on the 7th. We're doing this every day until we reach 1,000 subscribers. So yeah.